Mr. Speaker, we will abolish the 10% withholding tax on winning from lottery, otherwise known as the betting tax. Mr. Speaker, we will abolish the electronic transfer levy, E-LEVY, of 1%. Mr. Speaker, we will abolish the 10% withholding tax on betting. We will abolish the electronic transfer levy, E-LEVY, of 1%. We will abolish the emission levy, otherwise as in Wusie tax. We will abolish the VAT on motor vehicle insurance policy. Mr. Speaker, we will abolish the 1.5% withholding tax on unprocessed gold by small-scale miners. Mr. Speaker, the removal of these taxes will ease the burden on households and improve their disposable income. Right, Honorable Speaker, the removal of these taxes will ease the burden on households and improve their disposable incomes. In addition, it will support business growth and improve tax compliance. Mr. Speaker, Right, Honorable Speaker, the tax refund account has been abused in recent years. In the last 8 years, a study revealed that 29.1 billion Ghana cedis had accrued to the tax refund account, with only 12.5 billion Ghana cedis, representing 43% of the total accrued amount, being used for tax refund purposes. Mr. Speaker, the study also revealed that 16.6 billion Ghana cedis, representing 57% of the total amount accumulated in the tax refund account, was misapplied. Mr. Speaker, which is a total violation of the Revenue Administration Act, Act 915, and the Public Financial Management Act. Instructively, Mr. Speaker, there were virtually no tax refund arrests over the period. Mr. Speaker, and therefore, we are reducing the current tax refund ceiling by 2 percentage points from 6% to 4% of total revenue, as defined in Section 69 of the Revenue Administration Act, Act 915. Mr. Speaker, by reducing the ceiling on the tax refund from 6% to 4%, Right, Honorable Speaker, we have saved the taxpayer 3.8 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, this amount is enough to close the revenue shortfalls from the removal of the E-LEVY and the betting levy. So, Speaker, the E-LEVY would have accrued 1.9 billion Ghana cedis, and the betting tax would have accrued 180 million. The two put together is just above 2 billion Ghana cedis. By reducing the tax refund account from 6 to 4, it is enough to remove this tax, and the savings will be provided to take care of social interventions. Mr. Speaker, already we have saved 3.8 billion cedis for 2025 alone from one source, and this is enough to close the gap from the taxes we have removed today. Mr. Speaker, to address the concerns from well-meaning Ghanaians on how we are going to close the revenue shortfalls as a result of the removal of the selected taxes, the answer is that we have stopped the bleeding. We have stopped the bleeding. Mr. Speaker, accordingly, with this budget, we will amend the Revenue Administration Act 2016, Act 915. This measure will improve the tax revenue net of tax refund by 2%, representing 0.3% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, in line with government policy, the 2025 minimum wage recently negotiated with the National Tripartite Committee will be zero rated. This is consistent with our resolve to protect the poor and the vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, again, without increasing the levy, we will also review the Energy Sector Levies Act to consolidate the energy debt recovery, the Energy Sector Recovery Levy, and the Sanitation and Pollution Levy into one levy and use the proceeds to cater for energy sector shortfalls and service the inherited debt service obligation. Mr. Speaker, the reset has just begun. Right, Honorable Speaker, the rest of the energy sector levies, including the Road Fund Levy, Energy Fund Levy, Price Stabilization and Recovery Levy, Public Lighting Levy, and National Electrification Levy will remain to support the achievement of their intended objectives. Right, Honorable Speaker, Ghana has not sufficiently capitalized on the benefits of its extractive sector to generate revenue to support development and diversification. We have failed to leverage our natural wealth by capturing its rent and channeling it towards productive infrastructure and human capital. Natural resource rent, which is the difference between the revenue of a commodity and the average cost of producing that commodity, is about 14% of GDP in the case of Ghana. However, Mr. Speaker, revenue from extractive industry is around 1.5% of GDP only. This is because, as a country, we have failed to fully capture the economic rent of our natural resources. Mr. Speaker, whereas global gold prices have seen some significant increase in recent times, Ghana has not been able to take full advantage of the development. Subsequently, Mr. Speaker, we are proposing to increase the Growth and Sustainability Levy from 1% on gross production of mining companies to 3% to enable the nation to have its fair share of the windfall. Mr. Speaker, we also propose to extend the sunset clause to 2028. Mr. Speaker, we also propose to extend the sunset clause of the special import levy to 2028. Mr. Speaker, Ghanaians and this Honorable House will recall that road tolls on public roads were zero rated in the year 2022. Demand for construction and improvement of road infrastructure continues to increase, even as substantial arrests and claims in the road sector remains. Right, Honorable Speaker, while the annual average collection from road tolls have not been significant compared to its potential, the existing zero-rated policy for road tolls has increased the situation and dimmed the prospect of raising enough revenue from tolls to road construction and maintenance. Accordingly, government will work with the stakeholders, including the private sector, to roll out a technology-driven solution to reintroduce road tolls this year as part of the big push. Right, Honorable Speaker, we will also strengthen the legal and regulatory regime for non-tax revenue and enforce the framework to improve service delivery. This will be achieved through the introduction of an overarching non-tax revenue legislation, amendment of existing relevant laws, and the development of a national non-tax revenue strategy and policy. Mr. Speaker, as part of the reforms to improve other non-tax revenue streams, government will explore the operationalization of a regulatory framework for collection, management, and reporting of property rates consistent with our medium-term revenue strategy 2024 to 2027 and the Local Government Act. Mr. Speaker, we believe that the local authorities must be given the opportunity to collect their own property rates. on the 10th of March 2025 showed that overall GDP growth grew by 5.7% of GDP in the year 2027, compared to the growth rate of 3.1% recorded over the same period. Mr. Speaker, the key driver of this growth was largely coming from gold mine, Mr. Speaker, including Galamsey. Including Galamsey. Mr. Speaker, Galamsey growth cannot be sustainable. Mr. Speaker, non-oil GDP growth. Mr. Speaker, the non-oil GDP grew by 0.6% in the year 2024, compared with a growth rate of 3.6% recorded in 2023. Mr. Speaker, the gross international reserves increased to a stock position of $8.98 billion at the end of 2024 and was enough to cover 4 months of imports, exceeding the target of a floor of 3 months of import cover. At the end of 2024, the currency had depreciated by 19.2% against the US dollars, 17.8% against the euro, against the British pound, Mr. Speaker, and it had depreciated by 13.7% against the euro. Mr. Speaker, Right Honourable Speaker, it is what it is. The state of our economy is troubling, but we will fix it. Mr. Speaker, touch wood, we will fix it. But Mr. Speaker, it will require some sacrifices, truthfulness, transparency, and discipline. We will take strong measures to confront the situation head on. Mr. Speaker, the sacrifice must come from all stakeholders, beginning with the government. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President appreciates this and has led the charge by significantly downsizing his government from the Elephant 88 to the Umbrella 60. Mr. Speaker, he has also reduced the number of his government ministries from the Elephant 30 to the Umbrella 23. Mr. Speaker, as part of the contribution to the resetting agenda, organized labor has followed suit by working with government and employers association to agree on a modest 10% increase in base pay and minimum wage for the year 2025. Right Honourable Speaker, on behalf of His Excellency the President, I would like to express my profound gratitude to organized labor and employers. Mr. Speaker, ordinary Ghanaians have also sacrificed by enduring the negative impact of severe currency depreciation since 2022. Hyperinflation, high food inflation, principal and interest haircuts, soaring interest rates, among others. Mr. Speaker, it is now time for the people's representative, the members of Parliament, and the judiciary to also follow suit. I would like to call on all other stakeholders, including the business community, faith-based organizations, academia, and civil society to support this national call. So, Speaker, our immediate task is to reset our nation, to restore good governance, reduce the excruciating suffering of our people, and set our country on a trajectory of economic transformation. So, Speaker, our vision is to build a prosperous and a democratic state, anchored on the principles of freedom and justice, providing equal opportunities for all. So, Speaker, through this vision, we will work together to build the Ghana we want. Right Honourable Speaker, the resetting agenda will be anchored on the following. 1, restoring hope in our democracy, renewing trust in public officials, and helping every Ghanaian attain their full potential. Offering a trusted hand to the vulnerable, particularly women and youth, and creating a new Ghana for coming generations. And finally, stimulating demand by patronizing made-in-Ghana goods under the 24-hour economy. Mr. Speaker, today I came to this chamber with made-in-Ghana bag, signifying, Mr. Speaker, with made-in-Ghana bag, Mr. Speaker, I would like to first present, Mr. Speaker, they don't know that in Ghana we sew suit. Right, Honorable Speaker, I would like to first present the government's immediate and strong measures to address the current challenges we are confronted with, followed by the medium-term vision, policy objectives, and targets. Right, Honorable Speaker, consistent with Section 14 of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 911, the fiscal policy objectives of this government is to support the economic transformation agenda to ensure the macroeconomic stability of the country within the macroeconomic and fiscal framework. More specifically, the fiscal policy objective of the government include the following: rationalizing government expenditure and eliminating wasteful expenditures, optimizing domestic revenue mobilization through broadening of tax base, increased non-tax revenue collection, adopting enhanced tax compliance measures, and modernizing the tax administration through digital technology. Mr. Speaker, we will also increase the share of domestic expenditure to spur economic growth and job creation. We'll be reducing public debt to sustainable levels and adopting prudent debt management practice to support debt sustainability. Reducing the fiscal deficit progressively in accordance with the amended Fiscal Responsibility Act to promote fiscal and debt sustainability. And Mr. Speaker, restoring confidence in the Ghana economy. Right, Honorable Speaker, our approach will be to foster economic growth, accelerate job creation, reduce inflation, and stabilize the cedi. To achieve this, it is crucial that we establish the macroeconomic stability and ensure debt sustainability. Mr. Speaker, we are confident that by prioritizing these fundamental elements, we can cultivate an environment where individuals can prosper and businesses can thrive in Ghana. Mr. Speaker, Ghanaians, through the recent National Economic Dialogue, have expressed a clear desire for fiscal deficit and public debt to be reduced through cuts in government spending rather than through only tax measures. We wholeheartedly agree, Mr. Speaker. Going forward, we will tailor our expenditure to align with our fiscal realities. After all, whoever pays off their debt gets rich. Mr. Speaker, we are poised to implement a three-pronged approach to achieve our objective, beginning with this budget immediately. First will be to recalibrate the fiscal adjustment, and we believe that by prioritizing spending-led fiscal adjustment can initiate a positive cycle. Fiscal adjustment can initiate a positive cycle in a way that first, it will help lower inflation and curb depreciation of the cedi. Secondly, it will lessen government reliance on borrowing, which in turn will reduce the crowding out of private sector and lower interest rates. Lastly, this approach will ease the strain on monetary policy, allowing the central bank some greater flexibility to reduce monetary policy rates, ultimately resulting in lower bank and lending rates. Mr. Speaker, the second approach will be to deliver a shock therapy. Mr. Speaker, we are implementing a form of shock therapy to the economy by making significant spending cuts this year, thereby reducing the government financing needs and front-loading fiscal adjustment. This is the down payment for our policy credibility and creditworthiness. Right Honourable Speaker, our third approach will be to restore fiscal responsibility. By moving forward, we will enhance public financial management by empowering ministers to effectively manage their budget on their own, ensuring strict compliance with the commencement certificate. Mr. Speaker, we'll be passing and enforcing a revised Fiscal Responsibility Act. And finally, we will enforce the sanction regime for non-compliance of the Public Financial Management Act. Mr. Speaker, in pursuit of the overarching macroeconomic objectives, the following macroeconomic targets have been set for the year 2025. Overall real GDP growth of at least 4% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, not less non-oil real GDP growth of at least 4.8% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, end period inflation rate of 11.9%. Mr. Speaker, primary balance on commitment basis of a surplus of 1.5% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, gross international reserves, including oil funds and encumbered assets, to cover not more than a minimum of 3 months of import. Mr. Speaker, to address inflation, government will implement a number of measures to complement the Bank of Ghana and monetary authorities. Mr. Speaker, the measures to stabilize the exchange rate include the following. We will be establishing the Ghana Gold Board to enhance the generation of accumulation of forex to support the stability of the Ghana cedi. The Bank of Ghana will continue to implement its FX forward auction to support the stability of the Ghana cedi. Government strong fiscal consolidation through the reduction in public sector spending and the fiscal deficit will reduce the pressure on the exchange rate. Mr. Speaker, our import substitution drive under the 24-hour economy involving domestic production of key products originally imported will reduce import and related FX requirements, boding well for FX stability. Right Honourable Speaker, we are addressing the inflation problems through a number of measures, including the following. First, specific interventions, including the Agriculture for Economic Transformational Agenda, is expected to increase food production and reduce food inflation. Government will implement policies that target items with large weight in the CPI basket, such as transportation and utility, to reduce their prices. Mr. Speaker, our aggressive fiscal consolidation drive aimed at reducing the fiscal deficit and borrowing will contribute significantly to reducing inflationary pressures. Right Honourable Speaker, our strategy to improve exchange rate stability will reduce imported inflation and fuel prices. Mr. Speaker, the Bank of Ghana will maintain an appropriate monetary policy stance and use its liquidity management interventions to support the disinflation process. Right Honourable Speaker, to achieve our expenditure-led fiscal consolidation objectives, we will implement the following measures. Mr. Speaker, I now take you to our expenditure measures. Mr. Speaker, the following expenditure measures will be implemented in 2025 and the medium term to support fiscal consolidation agenda. First, we will conduct a comprehensive audit to validate the quantum of arrests and commitment as at 31st December 2024. Mr. Speaker, the mandatory use of blanket purchase order to capture multi-year commitment contracts in line with our medium-term expenditure ceilings will be implemented. We will amend the Public Procurement Act to provide for an independent value for money office to scrutinize government procurement. Mr. Speaker, we will also work with Parliament to amend the Public Procurement Act to make commencement certificate and budgetary provision a prerequisite for all procurement that will be paid by the central government. Mr. Speaker, we will fully integrate GANEPS and GIFMIS to ensure that only MDA's projects and purchase orders that have approved budget and allotment can obtain procurement approvals. Mr. Speaker, we will operationalize the compliance desk at the Ministry of Finance to monitor reports on commitment and arrest accumulation. Mr. Speaker, aside that, we will publish a PFM league table for compliance purposes. We will strictly enforce sanctions under the sections 96 to 98 of the Public Financial Management Act for breaches of the PFM Act, specifically those that relate to arrest accumulation and commitment control. Right, Honorable Speaker, we will cut waste, and we will cut it very deep. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, we have selected expenditure items including the Ghana Cares, the U-Start, One District, One Factory for complete elimination. Mr. Speaker, we will reassign the functions of development authorities such as Coastal Development Authority, the Northern Development Authority, the Middle Belt Development Authority to the district assemblies and do away with the development authorities. So, Speaker, we will amend the Petroleum Revenue Management Act to allocate all ABFA resources for infrastructure use, not for goods and services, but for infrastructure use. So, Speaker, the National Health Insurance will receive full allocation under the earmark funds capping and realignment act. So, Speaker, the road fund will receive full allocation under the earmark fund and capping and realignment act. So, Speaker, JNPC share of net carried and participating interest from 30, we will reduce the GNPC share of net carried and participating interest from 30% to 15%, and fully restore transfers to GNPC under the earmark fund and capping alignment act. Right, Honorable Speaker, we'll be amending the Mineral Income and Investment Fund Act to ensure that 80% of the royalties originally maintained by MIF is transferred to the Consolidated Fund for Infrastructure Development. Right, Honorable Speaker, we will strengthen social protection through the implementation of new interventions such as the no academic fee policy for all first-year students in public tertiary institutions under the No Fee Stress Initiative. The Speaker, it also includes the free tertiary education for persons with disability, free primary health care, the Ghana Medical Trust Care, otherwise known as Mahama Care, and free sanitary pads for schoolgirls. Mr. Speaker, to address the energy sector challenges, including reducing the quantum of large energy sector shortfalls, the following energy sector recovery program interventions will be implemented this year. First, Mr. Speaker, ECG and NEDCO will implement a number of measures, including metering and implementation of private sector participation. Mr. Speaker, we'll also implement the liquid fuel to gas swap through an increase in end gas supply from 60 MMSC per day to 100 MMSC to take advantage of cheaper gas prices and others. Mr. Speaker, we will complete the IPP capacity renegotiation to generate some savings through negotiated lower fixed capacity charges and variable O&M charges. Mr. Speaker, as agreed with the IMF by the previous administration, we will implement the following ESRP measures to achieve the structural benchmark of the IMF program. Mr. Speaker, PURC will continue to implement the quarterly tariff adjustment to reflect changes in inflation, exchange rate, and generation mix. Mr. Speaker, PURC will also undertake a major tariff adjustment which will be due in fourth quarter of 2025 to reflect capacity charges, additional liquid fuel usage, and additional capex. The weighted average cost of gas will be increased from the current $7.80 per MMBTU to $8.45 to reflect the increased prices of natural gas as well as the changes in the supply mix. Mr. Speaker, the subsidy on weighted average cost of gas granted to some ceramic companies through the discounted industrial development tariff will be reversed. Mr. Speaker, I now take you to the revenue measures. revenue measures. Mr. Speaker, in proposing some revenue measures to achieve the 2025 fiscal target for your consideration, I'll first take you to the IMF requirement. Mr. Speaker, this measures is inconsistent with our commitment under the IMF-supported program to observe a non-oil tax revenue effort of 0.6% point of GDP annually as part of the measures to improve domestic revenue mobilization and achieve our debt sustainability target over the medium term. Right, Honorable Speaker, despite our commitment to increase the non-oil tax revenue by 0.6%, we have programmed the following nuisance taxes for removal in line with our manifesto promise.